Hi, Ari. You ready to read Enola Holmes with me? I'm really excited. We're gonna do. So, there is a it's called a prologue on page 1. This is just like a little mini story before the story that will probably make sense to us later. And then we'll read the first chapter. So we're going to read pages 1 to 14. Okay? So that's what this one is going to be. And I'll make a different video for each chapter, I think. Okay? And you want me to do the British accents and everything, so that's what I'm going to do for the book. And I'll try to slow it down so that you can understand me. A couple questions you might have as we read are, this book is set way before either one of us was born. So there will be some things from the time that you don't know about and some words that you don't know about. And also, just because it takes place in London, they have different words for things than we do. Like, it's going to mention a constabulary, which that is where the policemen are. So it would be like calling the police. And they also communicate via wire, which means that you type it or write it on one end. So you write it on one end, and it gets sent over kind of like really, 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 really early email. And there's a way they do it where it says stop after every line. So it doesn't mean, hey, stop what you're doing. It means make a new line. So when I say stop, just hear it as make a new line. And then I think the other one, there's some plant names that you might not know. There's a plant name that I don't know. And the other one, a cipher. A cipher is a code. A code that you have to solve, or like the cipher is the way that you find out how to unscramble a code. Okay? Okay, here we go. Oh, and I have my tea. I might take a sip of tea now and then. Okay. In the east of London, I'm already messing up. Goodness. In the east end of London, after dark, August 1888. The only light struggles from the few gas street lamps that remain unbroken, and from pots of fire suspended above the cobblestones, tended by old men selling boiled sea snails outside the public houses. The stranger, all dressed in black, from her hat to her boots, slips from shadow to shadow, as if she were no more than a shadow herself, unnoticed. Where she comes from, it is unthinkable for a female to venture out at night without the escort of a husband, father, or brother. But she will do whatever she must in order to search for the one who is lost. Wide-eyed, beneath her black veil, she scans, seeks, watches as she walks. She sees broken glass on the cracked pavements. She sees rats boldly walking about, trailing their disgusting, hairless tails. She sees ragged children running barefoot amid the rats and the broken glass. She sees couples, men in red flannel vests and women in cheap straw bonnets, reeling along arm in arm. She sees someone lying along a wall, drunk, or asleep amid the rats, or maybe even dead. Looking, she also listens. Somewhere, a hurdy-gurdy spews a jingle into the sooty air. The black-veiled seeker hears that tipsy music. She hears a little girl calling, "Daddy! Da!" outside the door of a pub. She hears screams, laughter, drunken cries, street vendors calling,
Oysters! Sauce 'em in vinegar and swallow 'em whole. Fat uns, 4 for a penny.
She smells the vinegar. She smells gin, boiled cabbage, and hot sausage, the salty waft of the nearby harbour, and the stench of the River Thames. She smells rotting fish. She smells raw sewage. She quickens her pace. She must keep moving, for not only is she a seeker, but she is sought. The black-veiled hunter is hunted. She must walk far so the men who are pursuing her cannot find her. At the next street lamp she sees a woman with painted lips and smudged eyes waiting in a doorway. A hansom cab drives up, stops, and a man in a tailcoat and a shining silk top hat gets out. Even though the woman in the doorway wears a low-cut evening gown that might have once belonged to a lady of the gentleman's social class, the black-clad watcher does not think the gentleman is here to go dancing. She sees the prostitute's haggard eyes, haunted with fear, no matter how much her red, smeared lips smile. One like her was recently found dead a few streets away, slit wide open. Averting her gaze, the searcher in black walks on. An unshaven man lounging against a wall winks at her.
Missus, what you doing all alone? Don't you want some company?
If he were a gentleman, he would not have spoken to her without being introduced. Ignoring him, she hastens past. She must speak to no one. She does not belong here. The knowledge does not trouble her, for she has never belonged anywhere. And in a sense she has always been alone. But her heart is not without pain as she scans the shadows, for she has no home now. She is a stranger in the world's largest city, and she does not know where she will lay her head tonight. And if, Lord willing, she lives until morning, she can only hope to find the loved one for whom she is searching. Deeper and deeper into the shadows and East London dockside slums, she walks on, alone. Chapter the 1st. I would very much like to know why my mother named me Enola, which backwards spells alone. Mum was, or perhaps still is, fond of ciphers, and she must have had something in mind, whether foreboding or a sort of left-handed blessing, or already plans, even though my father had not yet passed away. In any event, "You will do very well on your own, Enola," she would tell me nearly every day as I was growing up. Indeed, this was her usual absent-minded farewell as she went off with the sketchbook, brushes and watercolours to roam the countryside. And indeed, alone was very much how she left me when, on the July evening of my 14th birthday, she neglected to return to Ferndale Hall, our home. As I had my celebration anyway, with Lane the butler and his wife the cook, the absence of my mother did not at first trouble me. Although cordial enough when we met, Mum and I seldom interfered in one another's concerns. I assumed that some urgent business kept her elsewhere, especially as she had instructed Mrs. Lane to give me certain parcels at tea time. Mum's gifts to me consisted of a drawing kit, paper, lead pencils, a penknife for sharpening them, and India rubber erasers, all cleverly arranged in a flat wooden box that opened into an easel. A stout book entitled The Meanings of Flowers, including also notes upon the messages conveyed by fans, handkerchiefs, sealing wax, and postage stamps. A much smaller booklet of ciphers. While I could draw only to a limited degree, Mother encouraged the small knack I had. She knew I enjoyed my sketching, as I enjoyed reading almost any book, on whatever topic. But as for the ciphers, she knew I did not much care for them. Nevertheless, she had made this little book for me with her own hands, as I could plainly see, folding and stitching together pages she had decorated with dainty watercolour flowers. Obviously, she had been at work on this gift for some time. She did not lack thought for me, I told myself, firmly, several times throughout the evening. While I had no idea where Mum might be, I expected she would either come home or send a message during the night. I slept peacefully enough. However, the next morning, Lane shook his head. No, the lady of the house had not returned. No, there had been no word from her. Outside, grey rain fell, fitting my mood, which grew more and more uneasy. After breakfast, I trotted back upstairs to my bedroom, a pleasant refuge where the wardrobe, washstand, dresser, and so forth were painted with pink and blue stenciled posies around the edges. Cottage furniture, folk called it. Cheap stuff, suitable only for a child. But I liked it. Most days. Not today. I could not have stayed indoors. Indeed, I could not sit down except hastily to put galoshes over my boots. I wore shirt and knickerbockers, comfortable clothing that had previously belonged to my older brothers, and over these I threw a waterproof. All rubbery. I thumped downstairs and took an umbrella from the stand in the hallway. Then I exited through the kitchen, telling Mrs. Lane, "I'm going to have a look around." Odd. These were the same words I said nearly every day when I went to look for things, though generally I didn't know what. Anything. I would climb trees just to see what might be there. Snail shells with bands of maroon and yellow, nut clusters, birds' nests, and if I found a magpie's nest, I would look for things in it. Shoe buttons, bits of shiny ribbon, somebody's lost earring. I would pretend that something of great value was lost, and I was searching. Only this time, I was not pretending. Mrs. Lane, too, knew it was different this time. She should have called, "Where's your hat, Miss Enola?" For I never wore one. But she said nothing and watched me go. Go to have a look around for my mother. I really thought I could find her myself. Once out of sight of the kitchen, I began running back and forth like a beagle, hunting for any sign of Mum. Yesterday morning, as a birthday treat, I had been allowed to lie abed. Therefore, I had not seen my mother go out. But assuming that she had, as usual, spent some hours drawing studies of flowers and plants, I looked for her first on the grounds of Ferndale. Managing her estate, Mum liked to let growing things alone. I rambled through flower gardens run wild, lawns invaded by gorse and brambles, forest shrouded in grape and ivy vines, and all the while the grey sky wept rain on me. The old collie dog, Reginald, trotted along with me until he grew tired of getting wet, then left to find shelter. Sensible creature. Soaked to my knees, I knew I should do likewise, but I could not. My anxiety had accelerated along with my gait, until now terror drove me like a lash. Terror that my mother lay out there somewhere, hurt or sick, or a fear I could not entirely deny, as my mum was far from young. She might have been struck down by heart failure. She might be, but one could not even think it so boldly. There were other words. Expired, crossed over, passed away, gone to join my father. No, please. One would think that, as mother and I were not close, I should not have minded her disappearance very much. But quite the contrary. I felt dreadful, because it seemed all my fault if anything had gone badly with her. Always I felt to blame for whatever, for breathing, because I had been born indecently late in mother's life. A scandal, a burden, you see. And always I had counted upon setting things right after I was grown. Some day, I hoped, somehow, I would make of my life a shining light that would lift me out of the shadows of disgrace. And then, you understand, my mother would love me. So she had to be alive, and I must find her. Searching, I crisscrossed forest where a generation of squires had hunted hares and grouse. I climbed down and up the shelving, fern-draped rock of the grotto for which the estate was named, a place I loved, but today I did not linger. I continued to the edge of the park, where the woods ended and farmland began. and I searched onward into the fields, for Mum very well may have gone there, for the sake of the flowers. Being not too far from the city, Ferndale tenants had taken to farming bluebells and pansies and lilies instead of vegetables. They could better prosper by delivering fresh blossoms daily to Covent Garden. Here grew rows of roses, crops of coreopsis, flaming patches of zinnias and poppies, all for London. Looking on the field of flowers, I dreamt of a bright city where every day smiling maids placed fresh bouquets in every chamber of the mansions, where every evening gentlewomen and royal ladies decked and scented themselves, their hair and gowns with anemones and violets. London, where... But today the acres of flowers hung sodden with rain, and my dreams of London lasted only a breath or two before evaporating like the mist steaming up from the fields. Vast fields. Miles of fields. Where was Mother? In my dreams, you see, my mum dreams, not the London ones, I would find her myself. I would be a heroine. She would gaze up at me in gratitude and adoration when I rescued her. But those were dreams, and I was a fool. So far I had searched only a quarter of the estate, much less the farmlands. If Mum lay injured, she'd give up the ghost before I could find her all by myself. Turning, I hurried back to the hall. There Lane and Mrs. Lane swooped upon me like a pair of turtle doves upon the nest. He plucking, sopping coat and umbrella and boots from me, she hustling me towards the kitchen to get warm. While it was not her place to scold me, she made her views plain. "A person would have to be simple-minded to stay out in the rain for hours on end," she told the big coal-burning stove as she levered one of its lids off. "Don't matter whether a person is a common or aristocrat. If a person catches a chill, it could kill her." This to the tea kettle she was placing on the stove. "Consumption is no respecter of persons or circumstances." To the tea canister, there was no need for me to respond, for she wasn't talking to me. She would not have been permitted to say anything of the sort to me. "It's all very well for a person of an independent mind without going looking for quinsy or pleurisy or pneumonia or worse." To the teacups. Then she turned to face me, and her tone also about-faced. "Begging your pardon, Miss Enola, will you take luncheon? Won't you draw your chair closer to the stove?" "I'll brown like toast if I do. No, I do not require luncheon. Has there been any word of Mother?" Although I already knew the answer, for Lane or Mrs. Lane would have told me at once if they had heard anything. Still I could not help asking. "Nothing, miss." She swaddled her hands in her apron as if wrapping a baby. I stood. "Then there are some notes I must write." "Miss Enola, there's no fire in the library. Let me bring the things to you here at the table, miss." I felt just as glad not to have to sit in the great leather chair in that gloomy room. Into the warm kitchen Mrs. Lane fetched paper imprinted with our family crest, the ink-pot and the fountain pen from the library desk, along with some blotting paper. Dipping the pen into the ink, on the cream-coloured stationery I wrote a few words to the local constabulary, informing them that my mother seemed to have gone astray, and requesting them to kindly organize a search for her. Then I sat thinking, did I really have to? Unfortunately, yes. I could put it off no longer. More slowly, I wrote another note, one that would soon wing for miles via wire, to be printed out by a teletype machine as Lady Eudora Vanette Holmes missing since yesterday. Stop. Please advise. Stop. Enola Holmes. I directed this wire to Mycroft Holmes of Pall Mall in London, and also the same message to Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street, also in London, my brothers. That's the end of chapter 1. What do you think so far? If you have any questions about any of the words or anything that's going on, you can call me or you can ask Grandma about the words. And then we'll start chapter 2 real soon. Chapter 2 is only about 9 pages, so we might do 2 and 3. We'll see. I love you. Be good. Have a good night.